So welcome to Red Run Golf Club. Glad to see everybody here. It's a beautiful morning. Happy to have you. I'm Joe Mackey. I think I know everybody in the room, but wanted to introduce our esteemed panel here of amazingly wonderful people that we brought together. And I'm going to just turn it over to Brendan and let you introduce yourself, and then Wendy and Bob.
Hi, everybody. My name is Brendan Walsh. I'm the president of Catalyst Solutions Group. We're an independent insurance advisory and consulting firm based in downtown Detroit.
Wendy Jones. I am blessed to be the CEO and founder of a company called Next Steps for Seniors. And we work very closely with families, walking and navigating, caring for their loved ones and what their next steps would be. We're in Rochester, Michigan, our office, but we cover the state of Michigan.
Bob Mannor. I'm the founder of Mannor Law Group. We have 3 offices throughout the east side of Michigan, but recently we joined on to a group called the Caregiver Trust Network, so we actually cover the full state of Michigan now for clients based on what we call caregiving trusts.
And Bob has 2 million followers on TikTok. So
I got lucky. My daughter recorded a quick TikTok and it went viral. So.
yeah.
Yeah. That is legit TikTok famous.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. He looks like a TikTok famous guy, doesn't he? The generation. Yeah. Okay, so you've been to things and people have said, this is a conversation, it's a panel discussion, right? But then nobody interrupts and says anything. Please do that. If something hits you, and I think we can everybody hear them okay and me okay? Probably will hear you okay. If not, I do have a microphone. I have questions that people submitted and that we came up with that we think are the most relevant things that you're gonna wanna hear about from these 3 people. But if something pops in your mind, just raise your hand and I'll call on you and let's get what's in your head out and discussed with these 3 people. Don't hold on to it, don't wait. Just say, hey, I got a question, okay? Cool. So we are gonna start with Wendy. How you help and share one thing with families, how you help and share one thing you wish families addressed earlier with their parents.
Okay, I love that question, thank you. So this is gonna sound crazy, but most of our elderly population, so I'm thinking of my parents who are in their 80s also, aren't comfortable if they have more than one child, like Joe who has 6, deciding on who's doing what in the family. And I've got to tell you, the biggest hurdle we have as an organization, and we have over 100 people a month that call my office, is nobody's on the same page. And even if you've got brothers and sisters, they're all trying to make a decision for mom and dad. I would say the number one thing is encourage families right now to have a conversation. And anyone in this room who raised their hand, guaranteed you have brothers and sisters that may or may not doing as much as you're doing, and you're frustrated, and there's sibling rivalry. I would say all of that can be resolved if the parents would have sat you all down at one time in one place and said, hey, she's making my financial decisions, he's making my medical decisions. Do you guys all understand this right now? It would have eliminated all the stress and frustration. So that would be my number one thing. Please, and if you can still do it now.
Yeah. All right, Bob, tell us about your work as an elder law attorney and give us a broader picture of what your team actually does for families going through this stage of life.
So Wendy teed me up perfectly for this because that was exactly what we find as most people have an estate plan in place to talk about those things about who would handle financial, who would be the backups, who could make medical decisions if I'm incapacitated, those types of things. But that conversation that we just talked about, it goes much deeper than that. So as part of, we do sophisticated financial estate planning, things like that. I'm not a financial advisor by any means. We work with the financial advisors, but putting the legal and the tax issues together. But there's a lot of folks that can have that ability to go through that type of planning. What I think is the key is to talk about what happens if you don't die. And what I mean by that is, of course, we're all going to die, but what a lot of planning doesn't really focus on is exactly what Wendy just talked about, which is what happens if you live. And for many of us, especially our parents' generation and things like that, frankly, their parents statistically didn't live as long. And so that we used to get older, we'd get sick and we die. Now we get older, we get sick and we live, and sometimes for decades. And so the question that we talk about is not just who we're going to put in charge of it, but where do we want that care? How do we want that care? I hear all the time people talking about, well, if I ever need care, I'd like to stay in my home. How many people have heard that before or think that? I would rather have that. Now, there's plenty of great communities and opportunities that sometimes are actually a better quality of life than living lonely alone in your home, but people that will do say that, okay, great. What's your plan? How are you going to make that happen? How are you going to finance that? And those are all things that you can have a conversation about, and I'll give you one example of that. So one of the things that we talked about was we just talked about was the unpaid caregivers. Well, what if, and this happens all the time, we have an unpaid caregiver that ends up retiring early or quitting their job or reducing their work schedule, and now we say, the mom and dad will say, well, we should probably pay our daughter for the services that she's offering. And then the other siblings start saying, well, wait a second, why is she getting paid? Why are we using up the estate on that person? And this happens all the time, almost every single time, frankly. So what if we kind of lay it out in your legal planning that says, okay, we would like to have family if it's available, and we're going to pay going rate. We're not going to pay them half of what going rate is. We're going to pay going rate so that there is no question about who's in charge, but there's also no question that we can pay for the things that we should be paying for and not have family arguments about it. So that's the sort of next level planning to think about. And then of course, obviously, we have to think beyond, well, what if the living at home option is not the best option? Sometimes that can actually get very lonely, and incorporating, okay, what kind of community would we be looking at? And those are the types of things that can kind of be pre-planned as part of your legal planning.
Yeah, absolutely. And I learned you guys even have social workers on staff at your law firm.
We do.
Which is interesting.
We have three what we call care navigators. Two of them are social workers, with the idea that we provide advocacy through this. A lot of times when we're dealing with one of these issues, there's so many sources, and Wendy's a great resource for this to help narrow down the noise. We kind of talk about, there's a national organization that if you call them, there's just so much more noise. You'll get bombarded with text messages and phone calls and all of that, and that doesn't help at all to get more noise. And that's one of the things that Wendy's company does, is help narrow down that, and that, not only that, but helping to make sure that we're making good decisions, both dealing with the doctors, getting the right medical answers and things like that. So we provide that advocacy as part of our legal services.
Yeah, awesome. Brendan, tell us what an insurance specialist does for families at this stage, and what's the biggest surprise families encounter when a parent's health starts to decline?
I think the biggest thing that an insurance specialist can do is help navigate what a parent has if they have insurance. Odds are, I'll go back to the second part. The biggest surprise I think a lot of people face in a misconception around long-term care is people think Medicare is going to cover the cost of it, which is a huge misconception. So to use jargon terms, Medicare covers acute care costs. So it basically will cover your stay in a hospital and possibly a facility for up to 20 days, and then a smaller percentage for the next 80 days. And then after 100 days, you're on your own. So that's a big, people are surprised with, but I thought that was my Medicare that was going to cover that. Where what I find with a lot of clients is, and this goes back to the communication piece that Wendy talked about, is if family members have long-term care insurance, it's been on the shelf and in their file cabinet for the last 10, 15, 20 years. A, they don't know where it is, and they don't know how it works. They don't know how much daily or monthly benefit they have. They don't know the benefit period. They don't know that there's an elimination period where you're going to be paying out of pocket for 3-6 months. So it's having those proactive conversations to say, do you have insurance? And if so, where is that information? What's the policy number? Let's find out what it is now, because if you need it later, does it have inflation protection? So is the benefit going to increase over time? So an insurance specialist can help you navigate that, even just to have an audit to say, okay, here's the policy, here's how it works, here's what you'll have, so that no one is surprised. And then the other thing is, file a claim as soon as humanly possible.
Yeah.
So that elimination period starts.
You
So,
think,
'cause
Brendan, I think about that. I've encountered situations where people say, oh, we have insurance, so we're covered. Like, to your point, having it doesn't mean you're covered. Who the heck knows what you bought 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago, right? And then that industry has been through a lot of change.
Yeah.
So what you thought you bought compared to what you have and how that applies and what all it covers. And
it can't hurt you to file a claim. They can't increase the premiums. They can't cancel the policy. I have a client who had major back surgery and was just out of commission for 3 or 4 months, and we filed a claim. She ended up not needing the care. She didn't need someone to come into home, but it was just in case she did that we would have that, we'd get that clock running on that elimination period so that we could get care in as soon as possible. That's paid for by the insurance company.
So just to add on to what he's saying, so when the phone rings literally at our office, one of the first questions we ask is, what is your financial position? How much do you have coming in? Because all of the care, like he mentioned, is out of pocket. So we're trying to determine how much can they afford a $7,000 assisted living. And the second question we ask is, do you have a long-term care policy? And I'll be honest, probably 15% of the people do. And when they say yes, we're like, oh, thank goodness. Because you just opened up the venue of possibilities when you have a long-term care policy. So.
Tim, you had a question?
Yeah, so I have a situation similar to that now, where dad has Parkinson's and is kind of in this thing where it's like he might need long-term care soon. Turns out he has a policy. He calls the insurance company, they mail it. So I review it. I'm in a position of understanding what's the elimination period and all these things. And it'd be really helpful if I had someone who could help interpret that and say, here's what you should do next. But like, who could be that person?
Well, I mean, I'm happy to help, right? I mean, anyone. So the difficult part with long-term care is that a lot of people who place those policies might not be in the industry anymore, right? They might have died, they might have retired, they might have sold their business, they might have just left. So I mean, not as a commercial for us, but I think an important piece of when you work with the financial advisor is knowing that they're going to review that policy with the client on a regular basis so that they know what they have and it's not a surprise, so that you don't have to get something sent in the mail where everyone knows, what's going on. But happy to connect with you after and can navigate and just tell you because another thing that people don't know about their policies is it reimbursement or is it indemnity? Which are important words of how is the insurance company going to write a check? Do you have to file a reimbursement form so that they're going to cover those costs, or are they just going to stroke you a check every month and you can pay the expenses however you want? So, but happy to answer any questions for you, for sure. It's a really good question because there are a lot of people that can self-insure. And so you're going to be shocked to hear this from the insurance person. Not everyone needs long-term care insurance, just like not everyone needs life insurance and not everyone needs disability insurance. So the real advantage is, does it make sense to leverage someone else's money to pay it, right? And a lot of that goes with people's financial goals of what they want to do with their money. Do they want to pass it on to charities? Do they want to pass it on to their kids? Do they want to keep that whole? Or can we cordon off a portion of it to pay long-term care expenses? The benefit of having a long-term care policy is really you're leveraging someone else's money. It's less expensive to pay that future cost by pooling your premium dollars with everyone else's and have them pay for it for you.
Another answer to that question, Brendan, would be that long-term care insurance policies have evolved in recent years.
Very much so.
It used to be a flat-out term insurance where it's a contract with the insurance company, you pay the premium, you go into care, they pay for whatever, right, portion of care. Now you can bundle cash value life insurance with long-term care, you can have permanent. There's different ways to do it, and it's really like, yeah, if you can self-insure, do you want to do that to protect assets or not? Right?
The stigma around long-term care insurance in the past was it was very much a use it or lose it proposition. If I never file a claim, I'll have paid all these premiums. My premiums went up over time. It was this whole thing. Now there's ways that there's death benefit associated with it, so you don't lose the premiums that you put into it. There's there can be a return of premiums that have paid in, so it might not have earned as much if you invested it with Joe, but it's that safety net that if I never use this,
I'll get something.
I'll get something.
Yeah.
But what I often refer to it is, it's like putting cash under the mattress, right? If you need it, it's there. If you need it for long-term care, the mattress explodes with cash, and that's the insurer's money using to pay the benefit.
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to throw a question out to the panel that came up a little bit earlier with Wendy's first question, and just talk, and people please jump in on this, and I will too. So the hardest part, I think, is having the conversation with your parents in the first place. How do you recommend adult children start talking with an aging parent about their care wishes? So Wendy said we should start, but how, right? Because it's not easy. Not everybody's like, yeah, let's sit down and talk about this at dinner tonight.
Well, it's everybody does things differently, right? No judgment. But I will share a story that I thought was fantastic. I have a doctor friend who was later in years and said she had a birthday party at her house, and she invited her entire family, kids, grandkids, everybody over, food, drink, everyone's having a good time. And she said, for my birthday present, we are all here because I want to tell you what my wishes are, and you are all going to hear it at the same time. So it was a party, and I thought, brilliant, because who doesn't want to go to a party to celebrate their mom? And everybody had a great time, but at the end, she actually brought it up. And you know what? Brilliant on her part, because she was a physician and she did nothing but watch families struggle and said, that is not going to be me. And so she did something about it. So that's an idea.
Yeah. But that's from the adult down. Now it's me trying to get my very stubborn father-in-law, to have a conversation.
Yes.
Extremely stubborn.
Yes. So a couple things. Number one, someone in the family is usually that right person, right? I mean, it sounds like he relies on you a lot. So you having the conversation might be the right person to have that. So pick the right person first. And my number one thing is go in love. Go in love. Anytime you deliver any message in love, everybody is just, Mom, I love you. I care about you. I want to do the right thing by you. I want to make sure that we can have this discussion while you can, because guess what? And Bob will talk about this. If you don't have that discussion, the state will make those decisions for you. And so there's times when I've had to say to people, do you want to make the decision, or do you want the state of Michigan to make the decision? If it gets that, to that point. Guess what everybody says?
That's actually, I think, a really important point to bring up that conversation. So one of the ways that we address this is to say, when we're having this conversation, and we try to have that conversation as part of developing the legal documents, and so it really opens the door where we're not saying, okay, Dad, we got to talk about if you can't drive anymore. At one point, I had 3 of my siblings work at my firm. This was many years ago, and we all joked about if we ever had to take Dad's keys away. Well, I'm not doing it, Pat, you can do it, But the idea is, we know how difficult that can be, and the conversation it kind of gets started with exactly what Wendy just said, which is, hey, this is really about, and especially for the older generation, the conversation of who do you want making family decisions? Do you want this to be a situation where this is kept in the family, that we don't end up in a situation where, number one, an outsider, maybe a court's involved, things like that, or just as bad most of the time, is decisions are being made in a crisis. And that's the key is sometimes I see this all the time, and at least probably 50% of my clientele only come to me in a crisis. I love it when people plan ahead, but the bulk of people probably come to me when the crisis occurs. And the family is now under a whole lot of pressure to make decisions, and sometimes they make bad decisions. It's one of the things we do in my office. I've trained my team that and I've told my clients for years, if you go to the hospital, call me while you're still in the hospital. Don't wait until we're at the point where we've gone maybe into a situation where they're doing physical therapy, occupational therapy, and they're about to kick you out of there, and they say, oh, but by the way, you can't go home unless you have 24-hour care at home. Now we have 48 hours to make a whole lot of decisions, and so the concept is to bring these conversations to Dad to say, okay, Dad, we understand that these are, actually not even bring it up that way, bring it up to the extent of, who do you trust more, your family, the people you love and trust, or would you want the possibility of outsiders or making decisions in a crisis? And that's where we, really can often bring folks that are stubborn, because they're one of the things that they're particularly stubborn about is typically, I don't want the government deciding anything here. And so even if that's not going to be 100% the conversation, that is certainly an opening to that conversation. And then we go into, okay, well, what do you imagine as far as care? Would you hope that family would be providing that care? Would we have paid caregivers? Would we look at some of these communities? Maybe we should start looking at those communities now, not because we need them now, but because we want to make sure we're making the best choices for you and what you want. For men, one of the questions I'm sure Wendy gets all the time is, are there any other men at this senior community? Because a lot of senior communities are mostly women. And so I've got a client, he has pretty severe dementia, and he has a poker table that he does every single day. And I've watched them, these 5 guys sitting around this table playing poker. They're all playing different games. None of them, but they're having a good time, and they enjoy each other's company. And clearly they're not following any rules, but they enjoy it. And it makes a big deal because he has other men to talk to, and that's not always the case in every place. So that conversation can often be brought up by focusing on something that is concerned about Dad is, I don't want the government involved in my stuff.
And I can speak to that from experience in that I had that conversation with my mom, and it was with my brother and sister, which is, if you don't, interesting family dynamics. I have an older brother and sister that don't talk to each other, but they were in town, and we were having dinner with my mom, and we had this conversation of, okay, we need to talk to Mom about what her plans are. We need to know what she has, not just with long-term care, but also her overall estate. I mean, my mom's 84 now. This was maybe 6 years ago. And I remember my anxiety of having the conversation and how I was playing it out in my head. But the moment we started the conversation, and to Wendy's point, of coming of a place of love and caring, it was such my mom was so relieved that we wanted to have that conversation, that we wanted to know. And now there's this open path of communication, still not between my brother and sister, but from my mom to us, that we know where everything is, we know what her plans are, I can't make medical decisions for my mom. I just can't. It's just emotionally. And my brother, who's a bit more of the cold, calculating, meticulous one, he's the one to do that. And that's the right fit. That's the way it should be. But now we've had that conversation, and everyone knows where everything is. So
You're on the same page.
yeah.
Rosetta?
I'm just wondering at what age you believe your elderly parent should have the conversation with you, or you should approach your elderly parent.
So I'm going to take that and put the next question inside of that also, because the next question is, what are the signs that you should look out for that would cause you to say, hey, there's an issue? So you're asking at what age? And then I'm going to throw in what are the age and the signs? Bring those things together and talk about what Rosetta asks in that.
Yeah, I'd like to start that just because it's not really an age, it's really the health of the person, right? So we've got 65-year-old people calling the office that really act like they're 85. So I would just be paying attention to health. versus age. Signs and symptoms, I can give you some real life examples. Walking around a vehicle and just looking at how many corners are dented will give you a really good indication on how mom and dad are driving. So you'd be shocked if there's more than two. I'm going to say get in the car with them ASAP and have them drive you somewhere. Chances are high they probably shouldn't be driving, right? So we already know you need to have that conversation. But hygiene is the biggest, I think, that you notice, and food. So when you're at their home and you open the refrigerator, is 90% of that expired? I mean, I'm just being honest, because those are the things, and you need to ask the questions, you know, Mom, what did you have for breakfast? And this is a true story. I was with a client and I said, you know, tell me about what you had for breakfast. And she said eggs, bacon, and toast. So the daughter called me in because she was very concerned that her mom was lying and wasn't, you know. So I was like, okay. And so I'm like, show me your house. You know, like throughout the day, I'm talking to her. And at one point I was in the kitchen. I'm like, my goodness, I love your fridge. Do you mind if I open it? I'm like, it's so big. You know, you're talking about the refrigerator. There was no eggs, no bacon, and there was no bread anywhere in the house. Now, I picked all this up. Daughter, at the end, when I walked outside, I said, your mom's not eating. And she's like, how do you know that? And I was like, there was no food anywhere in that home. So, you know, there might have been cheese and mayonnaise in the fridge, but you know what I mean? These are the things. So I would say pay attention to those signs and symptoms, the fridge, the car, the hygiene. Are they wearing the same clothes? If you don't see them every day, have a conversation with them and start asking some of those questions. But it's just really awareness and paying attention to what's going on around. But really the biggest things are those top three, I would say.
Is anybody dealing with that right now? Dave, you have a question. I also want to, like, do you have an aging parent where you're struggling to have the conversation?
And I don't know, Bob, if you know, do you have an answer to this? Because I have an
Go
idea.
ahead first.
I have an idea, and Bob may have more experience in this area. So the state of Michigan, if they were in Michigan, just so you know, the state of Michigan, you can actually fill out a form. I actually caught a car driving the wrong way on a road. And of course, I immediately assumed it was a senior, of which it was. So I followed them, got their license plate number, and you just fill out the story. This person was driving. Of course, I called the police also, but filled out the form, sent it into the state of Michigan, and they automatically, any form they get, they have to send, you need to come in for a driver's test. And 99% of the time, they won't go. They know that they just aren't going to drive anymore.
Send it in anonymously?
Anonymously.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can do that for your loved ones, obviously. Yeah. So now, I don't know about other state, like you said, I mean, Florida, for example, I'm sure is completely different, but I'll turn it over to Bob because you might know more on.
So a couple things on that. On a lower level, you can have an outsider raise the issue, and so the doctor's the perfect foil for this. If the doctor will participate in that conversation, and every, you know, just like every profession, there's some doctors that are going to be willing to engage in that. Some of them that are have their own opinions about those types of things. But often having the doctor and occasionally, and so you kind of make the doctor the bad guy, but because they're an outsider, it's not coming as there's less baggage than having it be a child or something like that. I've offered, and this has worked sometimes, although I don't think I have as much gravitas as the doctor. Sometimes we blame the lawyer. We say, well, the lawyer says you can't drive anymore because of liability, and for goodness sake, we wouldn't want to have you, you know, lose money because of a, you know, car accident or something. But there are companies that you ask about that will do this. We had, so we have a big event, Wendy's participated in it a number of times, where we train people in the long-term care industry. So we trained, anybody that has a license, like a social worker or a nurse, has to do continuing education, and we provide their continuing education. And so a couple years we've had this, he's a retired state trooper, he runs this company, and for the life of me, I can't remember the name of it. It's Safe Driving Inc. or something like that. But he is very compassionate about it, you know, sometimes we don't always equivalate state troopers as being compassionate, but he's very good at it, and he will have his team ride along and make suggestions and kind of do an analysis. And his company also has like workbooks and things like that where you don't actually have to have the hands-on, driving test, but that can kind of work through that conversation. So I can get the information to you, and I just, for the life of me, cannot remember the name of his company. He's based out of just across the border in that state down south that I don't like to talk about, Ohio. But
And I just want to kind of really quickly go
Yeah,
back to your
I got
question
you.
around having the conversation. It's never too soon. It can only be too late to have a conversation about this. And I mean, if it's coming from say generation 1 to generation 2, it's when the kids are ready, right? I mean, you'll know when your children are old enough to have this conversation with them. But it's never too soon, because with any kind of family planning, whether it's financial planning or estate planning or long-term care planning, the more communication that happens, the sooner, the better. We have this stigma around we can't talk about money or we don't talk about money, but it's actually the most important thing to talk about, because it's really important to communicate, Joe talks about our values and what we've built and how we've built it and why we're looking to preserve it and why we have the planning in place, but also what we want to have happen to us, right? Like, I think, when I'm older and my kids, I want them to know what Kelly and I are going to want to have done and how we're going to want to be cared for, but also to have the resources in place so it's not a financial burden on them.
Agreed. Thank you.
Thanks, Annette.
And what's interesting, I love that you said that too, about, I had a couple that the children were like, no, you have to move, Mom and Dad. You cannot stay here anymore. Moved into a community, and I begged that son, don't sell that house, please. Because I knew those people didn't want to move. And guess what they did? They moved back to their home. I tell every family, if you can afford to keep the home, just so they know it's there, do that as long as you can, because I agree with her 100%. This is their life. You want to advocate for them as much as you can, because you are the eyes and the ears and you're quicker and whatever, but we need to honor our parents. And it's just it's an opportunity to take and to say, you know what do you really want? Because I'm here to execute what you want.
To Annette's point and Wendy's thing that I've seen is, and read about, is as long as they stay independent, then they're healthier and better. And there's a fear in their mind that as soon as I start letting go of my independence, it's just like a slippery slope, right? Like if I go out of my home and into caregiving, well, then I'm just gonna, be a vegetable and die, right? There's an intense fear associated with that. So I think that's the part that's difficult.
There's definitely a fear there, and it is one of those things, kind of go back to the original question about what are the warning signs. The real question was, what is the warning signs of when we should have this conversation? But I like to talk about what are the warning signs that we need to make some changes, that we really need to push for some changes. And the thing is, you're absolutely right, there is this fear of leaving the home, but when you think about it, if they're home and they're kind of cocooning in their home because now they have less ability to get out on their own, they're not driving, they're dependent on their kids to get them around, and maybe we have the kids stop by for a few hours a week, we have some paid caregivers, but there's really not a lot of social interaction. It's almost cocooning, and it seems like, and it's what they tell us in all the movies, is that you should stay in your home and die with your boots on. But I have seen over and over and over again people thrive moving into different communities where they've got friends, they've got people to have lunch with, they got people their own age, they've got Elvis impersonators coming in once a month.
They go to the casino.
Yeah, they have, one of my clients, I was laughing because I was at one of the places there off of Dixie Highway there, and we were there talking to somebody, and I saw my client, and I said, hey, what's going on, Joe? he says, oh, I'm getting on the bus. And I was like, where's the bus going today? He's like, I don't know. If the bus is here, I always get on and we have fun and we go somewhere. And honestly, I'm going to say the vast majority, and we want to respect autonomy, we want to respect that, but the idea is the vast majority of the people that do move into an active community, often I see them 6 months later, and it's obvious that they're having a better quality of life. Now, that's not true for everybody. Some people, that's not the setting that they need. But certainly when we have memory issues and they're really interacting with very few people, those memory issues typically get worse. If they're interacting with more people, have people to talk to at lunch, have activities, have music that comes in where they have singers or they have a piano player or whatever, it often helps with those memory issues. They have a much more active brain and social interaction. And so we've seen it time and time again that if we can encourage folks, of course, autonomy, of course, that people get to make their own decisions. But I've seen it over and over again that the value of an active senior community can really make people less lonely.
So this is kind of what we do. This is what Next Steps for Seniors does. So I have a team of 18 people, social workers and nurses and experienced people in the industry with long-term. And we would assign a placement specialist to your family. And my team is so compassionate and amazing. They could go to the house, they could meet you at a restaurant. It's very personalized. They've all been in the industry for a long time, so they know signs and symptoms. They would go in love and just have a conversation from a professional that will have time to spend with her and the family.
It's in there. It's in the front of the packet. Yeah.
Next Steps for Seniors is at the very top. That's the one. Yep. So when you call our office, we do an intake, and then you're assigned immediately to a placement specialist that will just walk alongside you through all of this. And there is no charge for any of those services. So I highly recommend. The discussion is difficult to have. This particular one, I mean, it's clear it needs to happen.
It's been clear, it's
Yeah.
been really hard.
And maybe she does need to hear it from another person. And she's been to the physician and doctor, and there's no.
Oh, it's a hot mess.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we would love to step in and help.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think one of the issues there too is like you said, you have family that are all on the same page. That's where it gets difficult when we have family that's not, especially family maybe that is not there to see what's going on, and they're just telling Mom, you don't need to do what Sarah says. You're fine living alone, and they just are not there. Often they might live out of town, or they're just not there enough to understand what's going on. And so we often will do, this is something that a lot of lawyers are uncomfortable doing, but with what we do, I don't think there's any way around it, where we have a family meeting, sometimes with Mom, sometimes without Mom, where we have a conversation where everybody gets to sit around a big table and kind of tell what their thought is. And then we kind of hopefully, get down to the real core issues, because you think about it, everybody's probably coming at it with good intentions. But some people are getting their information from their friend, some people are getting it from their barber, some people are getting it from their neighbor, some people are doing it because that's what happened with Aunt Susie. Well, Aunt Susie's situation was completely different. And so we often will do a family meeting. One of the things that we often do with our social workers, which are actually on our staff too, is that no one ever, when we're dealing with the healthcare industry, wants to hear that there's a lawyer waiting on hold to talk to them. So we don't do that. We have instead it's the family social worker that works for the law firm. Now, they tend to be pretty effective because they have the law firm backing, but the idea behind it is the same type of a thing, having that conversation. I've been amazed at what some of the care navigators can do, and Wendy's folks too, where they can have a conversation that a daughter can't have with Mom, that a niece can't have with her aunt, because there's too much family stuff that's there. But having that social worker have that conversation, I've had this happen so many times where the family says, oh, mom or dad or aunt or whoever it is so stubborn, there's no way, we've had this conversation multiple times. Well, sometimes it's that they're not ready to hear that from family, but an outsider, they're more open to it. And then it's also kind of the way that you approach it. One of the things that I will tell people time and time again, if somebody has memory loss, which it sounds like this person does, has some form of dementia, logic is not on your side. If you try to convince somebody this is what they need to do, you might be successful, and they will forget that they had that conversation the next day. So it really serves no purpose. And so we really have to kind of take a different approach, that rather than convincing Aunt Jane that this is what she needs to do, because she might agree to it, and then by tomorrow she said, I never agreed to that, And so we really have to kind of take a different approach to that. But family harmony is the best answer, frankly. If we can get everybody on the same page, even if it's tenuously or temporarily, we've been able to have some of these family meetings and get the family to kind of coordinate at least long enough to deal with the crisis situation that's going on. And then they might not all continue to agree 6 months later, but moving that forward, that's the most powerful thing. If we have the entire family saying, mom, dad, aunt, whatever, this is what we really have to do. There's really no other option here. We love you, and this is what we care about you. And everybody's on the same page. But if you've got that one sister, you've got that one niece, you got that one daughter that's saying, no, you should be able to stay home because they saw that Clint Eastwood movie, not Clint Eastwood, who's the a Tom Hanks movie that showed that, really all you have to do is sit down with the elder person and touch their hand, and then they'll come back to reality and they'll be able to, that's just that's the culture that we're in, is that, that these are never, that any child or niece that wants to talk about, a placement in something that might be one of the nicest places that they could live and have lots of, activities and appropriate for their circumstances, that's looked at by society as neglecting or, dumping your aunt or your mother. And that's the exact opposite. It's actually a loving choice to consider that. But somebody who's never had to deal with this, that just, saw that movie, and they live in California, they might be feeding mom with a whole different set of thoughts. So,
I want to bring up something that I talk about with clients and friends often. It's this idea of things that are important and things that are urgent, right? And in our lives, we have plenty of things every day, all day long, that are important and urgent. And there's a lot of things that come through here that are not important and not urgent, but get our attention. And the issue, I think, with the planning that we're talking about, as our lives are busy and parents are aging, these things are incredibly important, but they don't become urgent until it's too late, right? Once they become urgent, now I've lost, some of their memory or faculty, or there's a crisis and now I'm coming in with my siblings and we're trying to get on the same page in the midst of a crisis, versus mom and dad are still healthy and everything's good, and me and the siblings are meeting and talking about what are we going to do and how are we going to approach and things like that. So the thing I really impress on people is realize that if you wait until this is urgent, you're going to have a lot more strife and struggle and difficulty. And so I'm going to ask a couple of different questions. I'm going to start with Brendan. On the insurance side, if people are going to consider long-term care, what is the window of time where you should really think about buying a policy or acquiring that insurance? It's obviously not 75, right? Or even 65, but where's the sweet spot?
So it's a very interesting question. If you ask anybody in insurance, they're going to always tell you that it's never too early to get insurance. But someone in their 40s doesn't need to be thinking about long-term care. Now, you could, and you might save some money. You might save a lot of money, but it's just really not top of mind. The sweet spot is probably 55 to 65, but a misconception is that there's this, a lot of people think of 70 as too old, but you might be able to get long-term care up until about 75. Like, it is possible. I think the underwriting point is 80 at this point. So
They'll stop under it. They
where
won't
they'll
underwrite.
stop underwriting. They will
Okay.
not underwrite anyone after age 80. But if you're in your 70s, you can get long-term care. I have a client that we put long-term care in place at 72. They got great rates. They did a hybrid policy, and they were really happy with it. You know, her husband was older, 10 years older, had Parkinson's. She was worried about preserving her assets for her kids. We cordoned off a portion of, I think she put $160,000 into a hybrid policy, and she has $400,000 of long-term care with inflation protection. But she knows that if she ever needs it, she can cancel it, get the premium back that she put in. So it was a really, she was 72, had no problems. She skated through underwriting. Long-term care underwriting is a lot simpler than people think. It's not like life insurance underwriting. It's not like disability insurance underwriting. It's an application and often a phone interview. And at its most, where it gets, the most intense it gets is a memory question. It's, they might do a memory test if you're older, if you have a history of something with your family, and that's more annoying than anything else. But some people get thrown off when they ask those.
Awesome. So sweet spot 55 to 65 and possible up until 80, especially if they're healthy in 72.
I'd say sweet spot is 65 and younger, right? I
Okay.
mean, people aren't thinking about long-term care typically until they've experienced it with someone close to them. And then all of a sudden it's on their mind because they're seeing how much the out-of-pocket cost is for it. That's where most people are getting long-term care is 55 to 65. I'd say sweet spot is anything younger than that. Again, the younger you are, the better it is.
Yeah, the
but,
better the rate.
The story is not over when you get into your 70s for long-term care.
It's that interesting thing of the younger I get it, the rate is lower, but I have it for longer. The later I get it, the rate is higher, I have it for shorter, but I also take the risk of my health declining.
Correct.
And not being able to get it, or the premium being really high. So it's a weird little dance.
That's correct.
Yeah. Amy, you had a question? Yeah, so we were talking about that earlier. That does exist, and
You just want to take a look at what they're actually putting it in. We're kind of getting ahead, if that's okay.
Yeah, no, go ahead. No, this is very fluid.
I'm going to do a kind of a long-term care insurance 101. If everyone's not really familiar, there's three main ways to insure. So there's self-insurance, where you can use your own money to pay long-term care. And then there's three main types of long-term care insurance, and each are appropriate for different people. So traditional long-term care is where you pay an annual premium. You're going to pay for it as long as you have the policy. If you never use the long-term care policy, it's a sunk cost, right? It's pure insurance. The advantage is the annual premium is generally lower. The disadvantage is the premiums could go up at any point. And traditionally they have, and they've gone up a lot. So it puts clients in a really tricky spot where they might be older, they might be uninsurable, they've had this policy, and now the premiums are spiking 80%, and they don't want to lose the policy. So you might need to reduce the benefits, or you just eat the cost. But that's traditional long-term care. The second, where the market, and the other thing with that is there's fewer and fewer insurers that are writing traditional long-term care insurance. They're getting out of the market. And when you see them get out of the market, the reality is that means it's better for the client than it is for them. It's not profitable for them, so they're getting out of the business. So this is not like an insurance salesy thing, but if you ever see an insurer getting out of a piece of business, take a look at it, because that means it's probably better for you than it is for them. Does that make sense?
So grab it before it's
grab it before it's gone. They're losing money on it, which means it's actually better for you. Where the market has moved are to these hybrid or asset-based long-term care policies. So this is where you can move a lump sum of money in one premium. They've evolved it where you can pay it over 10 years or to age 65. You can pay it over 5 years. There's a lot more flexibility, where they're using a life insurance and sometimes an annuity contract, and it's all long-term care riders. The difference between using life insurance and annuity is the life insurance has a death benefit associated with it. So you would put a lump sum into the policy, but it's designed around how much monthly long-term care benefit that you want and for how long. So the big drivers in long-term care insurance policy design is how much do you want it to pay for per month, for how long, and do we need to protect for the increasing cost of care? And you can do that on a 3% or 5% basis as simple or compound interest. So with the hybrid policy, if it's a life insurance contract, so let's say you put $100,000, if you die, it might be a $150,000 death benefit. and then they'll often have a return of premium. So if you never use the policy, you could get the $100,000 back. Depending on the plan, sometimes there's a surrender charge, so it's that return of premium is lower, and then the longer you hold the policy, it becomes 100%.
And then Brendan, if you go into caregiving, then that somehow is a function of what money went in.
The benefit's a lot higher. So if they're what you'd want to look at is, okay, if you put it 100,000 into it, how much care is that paying for? If you're putting $100,000, it's not a lot of care. So you'd want to see how that policy is designed, or for how long the benefit period is. And I lost my train of thought based on what you just said.
Oh,
No, but no, I want to go, what did you just say again? Because
about the amount of care you get for the amount of money you put
Yeah,
in. There's a
yeah.
proportionate ratio there.
Correct. So rather than thinking of how much you're putting into it, you want to look at how much care you want it to provide. The last area is actually life insurance with long-term care riders. This is much more attractive for younger clients. So the ideal client for that is someone who needs life insurance now, but is worried about long-term care later. So you can get a permanent life insurance policy and put a long-term care rider on it to pay for future long-term care expenses. You can't do it with term insurance. It has to be a permanent policy, but you could take a $1 million permanent life insurance policy, and it can have up 2 to 4% of the death benefit pay for future long-term care expenses. So if you need long-term care and you have a 4% benefit, in the future it'll pay $40,000 a month, up to $40,000 a month for long-term care, and it reduces the death benefit by how much care it pays out.
Yep.
Similar to those hybrid policies, if like someone put $200,000 into a plan, got $100,000 of long-term care and died, they would actually get the residual death benefit that's left.
Melissa? I think that's a Brendan and a Bob question. So you and Mike have resources. You're in good shape.
Yes.
Your parent, is it your father?
Both my mom, stepdad, and my dad.
Okay, 3. Right. You guys are looking at them and feeling concerned
Yes.
that they don't
We've not seen anything, but
Right.
their lifestyle,
would tell you to be concerned.
yes.
So this is part of that conversation. But children can buy long-term care insurance on their parents. So the parents have to know they're being insured, right? I mean, there's consent to being underwritten, but we've had conversations with clients where the children pool their resources and they pay for this so that they don't have to pay the out-of-pocket expense because the premiums are much less than what they'd pay for the care. So that is something that you can do in your planning.
Absolutely. And then
So then the other side of it, when we have that discussion, and this is certainly a reasonable segment of part of the work that we do, is help look at what resources might be out there as far as government benefits. So once you are at a certain level, we're probably not going to be considering government benefits. We talked about Medicare and Blue Cross, or the insurance isn't typically going to pay for long-term care or any home care, any consistent home care, things like that. But we can look at things like, well, are any of them veterans? Were their spouses veterans? There's some significant veterans benefits that can help, be involved. And again, depending on where they are financially, the VA does have some rules about assets, but it's not as bad as you think. I mean, you can have a house of any value as long as it's under 2 acres. You could have a $3 million house as long as it's sitting on less than 2 acres. They exempt it for veterans benefits. You can have about $160,000 in other assets. You can have as many cars as you want and still qualify for these veterans benefits. And so sometimes that can be very helpful. Now, is it going to solve all the problems? No, but it can, it can add to the dollar amount that we can use for care. And then, of course, we're going to be looking at Medicaid options. Now, I know as soon as I say that, sometimes people get really nervous about that because we hear that Medicaid is just for folks that are impoverished. And, well, the folks that you're talking about may not be, may not have the resources that to pay for everything. Are also not impoverished. And as with every government benefit, if you know how to apply the law properly, you can improve your circumstances. And so there's a program, Medicaid actually involves about 36 different programs, and one of them is for people over age 65 that need continuing care. And there is, unfortunately, they don't just give it to you like Medicare when you turn 65. You have to jump through some extra hoops, but there are hoops to jump through for that. And there are 3 primary programs in Michigan. 2 of them are home care type programs, and one of them is more of a nursing home type program. But those are things that we should be at least making sure we're not putting them in a worse position to be able to qualify for that. We might not want to go with the Medicaid option right away. You have limited options, more limited than what you would have with private pay options, but they're not as limited as you think. So for example, the nursing home option, people say, oh, well, that probably means the worst nursing homes. No, it means any skilled care facility in the state of Michigan is required under law to provide a certain number of Medicaid beds. Now, there's a few older ones that got grandfathered in that don't have that, but those are usually the older places. All the newer places like the Wellbridges or some of the newer places all have to take Medicaid because they take Medicare. So if they take Medicare and they've been, got their license since I think 2006, I believe, they have to take a certain number of Medicaid. So there's different things you can do. Last quick thing is, I use the example, my father had open heart surgery. He was a GM retiree, he had Blue Cross, he had Medicare. It was extremely expensive, but he paid almost nothing. So over about a 2-year period, about $500,000 was paid out for his care with the surgery, with rehab, with prep, everything. And they didn't expect him to become impoverished as a result of it. My mom at the same time had Alzheimer's, same 2-year period. Her cost of care was a lot less. And because my dad was lucky enough to get heart disease, he didn't have to go broke, but the expectation is that mom did because it's a different, you got, on the Wheel of Fortune, you got a different disease. And so there's this Medicaid program out there that is an insurance program, and there are rules that you can follow to be able to preserve assets, especially for a married couple. In most cases, for a married couple that doesn't have $1 million or more, we can often preserve 100% of the assets in favor of the spouse, the healthier spouse, and still qualify for one of these Medicaid programs. So it's just something that we should be taking into account. If you're self-insured or pretty close to being self-insured, we're probably not going to be looking at Medicaid, but we might be looking at that for our parents, for our aunts, for other folks that maybe aren't in the same financial position. And the last thing we want to do is put ourselves in a worse position to be able to qualify for those programs.
Wow, there's a lot of options. So it goes back to the communication and how do you get the conversation started to find out what is there, and then engage the professional resources to say, how do we link up? Yeah, that's tough. Preston.
I'd say medical, legal, and financial.
Yeah.
That's a delicate question.
I would say, I love what she said, ask them what they would like to do, because one of them might have a different type of relationship, and they might want to be the caregiver role where they're doing meals and bathing, and you don't know what it's going to come to, but that person has a lot on them. And it helps if the other person takes them to appointments, schedules their nails, whatever. You really got to separate it out and make it really clear and defined. And I love the idea of asking them first. The financial is a really important component, but the financial person and the medical person, if they're not the same person, really go hand in hand at the end of the day. So just make sure that relationship is strong. You don't want his brother and his sister having those two things because they don't have a conversation with each other. So I mean, that would be some advice I would give.
Bob, the next question, which plays right into the question Preston was asking, are what are the legal documents his parents should have in place?
Right.
It seems that there's a couple of obvious, but go deep. Preston should be saying, we need to have this, and what else?
So great question, and the words that we use might change slightly from state to state. Okay, so what we call the documents might change a little bit, but they're basically the same. It's going to be basically the same documents. It's just the common language in Illinois might be different than Michigan. So I think the most important one, and this is not what people always imagine it is your financial power of attorney, the durable power of attorney. Now, what we often are recommending is that we go and make it a stronger than your typical durable power of attorney. People think, hey, I got durable power of attorney, that means I can do anything for my parents. No, actually, most of them have very significant restrictions as to what you can do. And I don't like restrictions. If we've got loving family that are looking out for the best interests of mom and dad, we want to get rid of those restrictions because we want flexibility to be able to deal with whatever that situation is. If there's a death in the family, we need to be able to update beneficiary designations. Well, most power of attorney don't allow you to change beneficiary designations. So we have this thing, and this is pretty well, I think this language is probably used universally throughout the country, but we call it extraordinary powers. It goes above and beyond, and things that you might think you wouldn't necessarily want, but an example of an extraordinary power would be the ability to move assets from one person to the next. What's another word for moving assets out of somebody's name? Sounds like we're stealing them, but let's think about that for a second. What if we were just moving assets from mom to dad? Does that look like stealing? Well, the law says it is. If we move a house out of mom's name and into dad's name, the law could say you don't have that legal authority under a standard power of attorney. So we want to have a robust power of attorney. Typically, that is going to be someone that does a little bit more than your standard estate planning. You're looking for, unfortunately, 40 years ago, we decided on this term elder law. All the people that were around at that time that created this have regretted using that term, but that's the term we've all accepted as elder law. It's a little bit different than standard estate planning. The next, of course, is your medical decision making. I think across the country, the person always gets to make their own decisions, okay? So we talked to the doctor earlier here, and she said that, we want to make sure typically it has to be triggered by two doctors saying that they can't make their own decisions. That is in the law. You can't assign your right to make your medical decisions to your children. You always have the right to make your own decisions as long as you're awake, meaning you're not in a coma or unconscious, and two doctors haven't declared that you don't understand the question, because the document only takes effect then. We have another addition to that we recommend that people do, and it's under the actual mental health code in Michigan, and that is, what if we have someone who might be altered because of a urinary tract infection or some other altered, maybe it's a medication they've been taking, maybe it's just the trauma of a fall and they have delirium and they are not aware of their limitations, and so they're in the hospital, they need an antibiotic, they need to stay in the hospital for a few nights to get that antibiotic, and they refuse to stay. What if they've appointed you as their person to be able to make medical decisions? The two doctors say they can't make their own medical decisions. Do they still have the right to fire you even after the doctors have declared them incompetent? In Michigan, the answer is yes. They can fire you as that person even after they've been declared incompetent. So we add an additional provision in our documents that say, gives them like a 30-day cooling off period. So if that ever happens where somebody's declared incompetent, we say, well, the person I appointed still has that ability to act for 30 days. If after 30 days I still want to fire them, then they're fired, okay?
What about Illinois? Do you know what Illinois is?
Probably a similar type of a thing. My guess is it's very similar throughout the country, that this is a constitutional right of self-determination. You didn't generally get to make your own decisions, even if they're bad decisions, right? So then everybody probably needs some kind of will, but most people are going to want to have some kind of a trust too. A trust is just a contract between you and your family that says to empowers people so that we don't need a judge making decisions. We're empowering family to do that. And then obviously there can be variations on all of those, but those are the four basic documents that have become really important. I don't like the terminology, but it's because it's under the mental health code in Michigan, we call it the mental health provision, but then I always explain it away because people see that and they say, well, I'm not bipolar, I'm not, I don't have any mental health issues. Often, unfortunately, dementia is sometimes treated as a mental health issue and probably shouldn't be, but it's kind of has that same kind of issues that we have to deal with. And so it is one of those things where we do recommend that we include that provision in your health care. So in some states they might call it a patient advocate. The tradition in Michigan is called a health care power of attorney. Sometimes they call it a living will, although that's not really an accurate statement. But there's different terminology they might use for that.
Amy?
Yeah, so it's a decent option. I think sometimes it's not always the best option because there are some planning opportunities for taxes and some other things where, if it's a small amount of money, sure, do a transfer on death. But if we have a $2 million IRA and we're doing just beneficiary designation, there might be some tax advantages of having things like disclaimers and having the grandkids pay the taxes on it, but still have the kids have control over it. There's so many opportunities that you're missing out by just doing strict beneficiary designations or transfer on death. So it's certainly an option. It's a better option than putting somebody's name on it, which I tell people, never put your kids' names on stuff. Transfer on death is a good option. It's not always the best option.
Yeah, and we recommend that, Amy, for like your personal bank account that has $10,000. Your checking account you write checks out of, if you don't put that in the trust, you put TOD or POD on it, fine, but everything else titled very, very properly. John?
And beneficiary designations supersede anything else.
Right.
So it avoids probate. So anything that can have a beneficiary designation should be properly, not only with a primary beneficiary, but a contingent beneficiary as well, if that primary beneficiary predeceases you.
Yeah. John?
Excellent point. So how often should those documents be reviewed and maybe updated? Number one is it's going to be more universally accepted from state to state. Number two is it has some enforcement mechanism. Before, and still to some extent, we're often arguing with the bank or the financial company to accept the power of attorney and having to jump through all kinds of hoops. Because under the law prior to that, to 2024, there was no teeth in it. There was no enforcement. We couldn't force them to accept the power of attorney. The new power of attorney law, if you comply with the new requirements of witnessing, notary, and all of that, there's some additional requirements to make it meet that new. There are some enforcement options that make it so that the bank is more likely to accept it. Having said that, is a 20-year-old power of attorney, whether it be medical or financial, still valid? I would say legally, yes. Is it going to be accepted? Very often, no. So how do I get around that if that's the best I can do and the person now does not have the capacity to sign updated legal documents? Often an opinion letter from an attorney. So I write these all the time and I say, I've reviewed the 20-year-old document. I've discussed this with the family. To the best of my knowledge, this is still valid and has not been changed and has not been revoked or updated. And often that will be sufficient to let them use the old one. How often should you review them? For our clients, we have this kind of built in that every year we have a check-in and we ask a series of yes or no questions, and if they answer yes to any of the questions, then sometimes that might mean they need an update of their documents. Has their person moved away? Has there been a death in the family? Have they switched banks? Have they switched financial advisors? Every year we try to check in because things change and your documents might not be relevant because of your life changes or because of legal changes.
So Bob, while you're on a roll, I'm going to pull out something you said that we discussed recently, and this is really, really key because this gets into the nuance of the situation with your parent. I've heard there's an important difference between competency and capacity. When it comes to signing legal documents, a lot of families assume if a parent has been declared incompetent, it's too late. Can you clear up in that gray area what are we looking at?
Yeah, so this goes back to the dignity and self-determination and being able to make some decisions yourself and being treated like a person. So too often there's a rush by many lawyers and others and even people in the healthcare industry, a rush into a guardianship where we have to have a court. Now, if you're under a court guardian, your personhood is almost removed. Your ability to make legal decisions, to sign contracts. If somebody's under a guardianship, they can't even hire me they would have to have a court-appointed lawyer because they can't sign a contract with me because someone under a guardianship can't sign it. So when we say competency, it's competency for what? You know, are they competent to be able to balance their checkbook? Maybe not. Are they competent to decide that they want a piece of chocolate cake even though they're diabetic? Well, that's a good question, and the answer sometimes is, do they understand the consequences of their behavior? If they say, if you look at me, you see I sometimes make not the best healthcare decisions when it comes to whether I have chocolate cake or not. And so why do we take that away from somebody that's 80, but I still get to make bad decisions for myself? And so the question is whether or not they have the capacity to understand the consequences of their decision. So if they have the capacity to understand the consequences of their decision, they often can still sign a legal document. So back to that balancing the checkbook. The doctor may say, well, I can see that they're not able to kind of process these numbers or balance their checkbook. They really need some help with managing their finances. But that doesn't mean they don't have enough of an understanding of their surroundings to say, okay, I can't balance my checkbook, but I want my daughter to be the one that does my, you know, pays my bills for me. They still understand who their daughter is. They understand money. They understand they own a house. They understand their assets. They want their daughter to be able to do that. That's capacity versus competency. They likely would still be able to sign those documents. Do I always go with that lower standard of capacity versus competency? And the answer is no. If we've got a family like yours where all the siblings are getting along and everybody's doing the right thing, then absolutely we're going to use that lower standard and avoid having to go to court. If we've got 4 siblings that are all fighting and arguing about it, we're probably going to end up going to court because I don't want to have a big fight later on. So, but that is the legal standard, and it's very clear by the court process, everything else, that the ability to sign a new power of attorney or those types of things is based on capacity, not competency.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for,
And
yeah, go ahead.
something I just, a piece of family members' plans that is often overlooked, and Joe can speak to this as well, is on the financial side of things with both assets and insurance. They can list a secondary addressee on their insurance policies and on their financial accounts. And this is hugely important if there's a diminishment of capacity. So if we have early onset dementia or Alzheimer's, or if they're missing a bill on their life insurance or their long-term care insurance, you can be listed as a secondary addressee. So if that policy enters a grace period, you'll get a notice in addition to them so that you can reach out and make sure that everything is still in order. So not everyone is talking about this, but making sure that they have, and it's a very easy thing to add to existing policies, existing accounts, and get listed as a secondary addressee. You're not making financial decisions, you're not directing the assets. It's a just in case an important piece of mail comes and it gets missed, it's gonna go to you too.
Yeah. We also call that a trusted contact. So anybody that's a client in the room, we've asked you about and sent you forms to sign to add a trusted contact so that if anything gets missed or seems not right or whatever, if Mike calls me one day and is talking crazy, you know, you're his trusted contact. I can call you and go, hey, is Mike okay? You know? Yeah. No, he's not. No, we know he's not. We've got about 8 minutes left, and I want to transition the conversation a little bit for the little bit of time that we have together. So one more time, raise your hand if you have an aging parent in your life that you're having some relationship to, caregiving for, starting to have conversations, worries. So Wendy, we've focused a lot on the aging parent, but what about the caretaker, spouse, or the adult child doing the heavy lifting? What support exists for them?
Okay, so a couple things. Respite, I think, is fantastic. And what respite is let's say you want to go on a vacation this summer. Let's say you want to go for 2 weeks in July. We can set up a independent living or assisted living place that's already pre-furnished, and they could move in for 2 weeks to a month, for example. They could be cared for, have their meals, have everything done, so you can go to your summer cottage up north and know that they're cared for in that place. So obviously there's a cost. It's a temporary care. I'm doing it with a family right now because they wanted to go on a vacation and there was a wedding out of the country. So the dad is in assisted living and they're paying for it, and he's happy and everything's fine and it's going well. So I think respite is a huge opportunity to give a family a break. Unfortunately, you can't do it for a weekend. They usually want you to commit a minimum of 2 weeks to 30 days.
Does that apply to in-home care as well?
This is just to go into a community somewhere, okay? Now, if you wanted to private pay, the average price of home care is $35 an hour. So you could have a caregiver company, and we have a ton of companies that I would refer you to that are very good that we have vetted, that could come to the house and they could take care of them 24/7, which you can add that up and it'll tell you about how much that would cost at $34 an hour. So either way, it's an option. If they have the funds, you can have a caregiver go move into their house with them and stay with them 24/7. One of the biggest things I think for support, if you're fearful, is do you have security? I say, Mom, Dad, we're putting a security system in, but you have cameras. And usually, and I say this because we had a gentleman that had a stroke in his family room. His wife had already passed, and the kids didn't know for 3 days. It was heartbreaking. How would you know that? So if they had had a camera, they would have known Dad was on the floor. We can get there as soon as possible. You can watch it on and they're everywhere now. You can get them at Home Depot. You can watch it on your cell phone. The other options I would say is there's a lot of caregiver support groups. I know people say, oh, I don't need that. Or Parkinson's Foundation, for example, does an amazing job with support. And they also give you funds for a week for respite if you have a loved one who has Parkinson's and you just need to get away and you can't afford to pay for the care. So there's a lot of foundations out there. Alzheimer's Foundation also has a lot of great support groups. But I would say there's a lot of things we can do, we meaning Next Steps for seniors. If you're struggling, we can walk alongside you and put different support systems, whether it's helping you get the right person to put a ramp in and showers things. I mean, we have all these, we have a database of 5,000 resources. We have transportation companies. We have everything you can imagine. You can make one phone call to our office and we can help you with that. What we specialize in is assisted living, independent living, memory care places. When you say, how do I know the right place to go to? We know, we do an intake, we understand your situation, and we would refer you to the exact place that would hit the need. Instead of you getting on the phone, going on Google, trying to figure it out all by yourself, you have an advocate that will walk alongside you and say what is most important to your loved one. If it's food, we know the places that have the best food. If it's, they like to garden, we've got places that have pools if they like to swim. Instead of you going on Google and trying to figure all that out, we will help you do that. Our placement specialist will walk alongside you very compassionately and lovingly and help you find the right next steps.
And what a lot of people don't know is long-term care insurance will pay for respite care. So when people hear long-term care insurance, they immediately think of a nursing home. Long-term care insurance will pay for nursing home care, assisted living facilities, alternative style care, respite care, home health care, and hospice care. Because sometimes hospice will go longer than, I've known people that have been in hospice for a year, and long-term care insurance will pay for that, but it does pay for respite care. But that goes back to the piece of, that's why you want to file a claim right away.
Yes.
Is because you might be getting help from a family member for years and want to get respite. That claim's already filed, and then the long-term care insurance policy will pay for that.
So an adult day, really quick, so there's programs where they can actually even pick up your loved one at home and bring them to the place, and they would stay there from basically like 9 to 4 and then bring them back. So if you're working during the day and you just can't be there, adult day is fantastic. A lot of the senior centers also have adult day centers, and it's just purely during the day. There's no overnight. A respite is where you move in and you're there the entire time. But a adult day, you're just there for the day. But thank you. That's a great
I
opportunity.
think when stuff like this happens, I'll get to you, Sue. I got you. It happens slowly, right? Like you start to notice something, and then things happen. Then we're all capable, smart, hardworking, caring, loving people. We start doing things, and then it starts to feel lonely. You're supposed to feel isolated and like you're the only one and I don't know what to do and I am Googling stuff and I'm getting confused and now I'm asking ChatGPT to help me and, in my brain. And then like you said earlier, Bob, and so did this and my neighbor said that and I went to coffee with my girlfriends and they all talked about their situation. Next thing you know, your head is just spinning.
Right.
And you're exhausted and you're isolated and you're confused.
Right.
There's resources.
Right.
There's a ton of them. There's a ton of government programs. There's a ton of resources. It's just connecting with the right people. Sue, you had a question?
Long-term care is very clearly defined when you're eligible. It's unable to perform 2 of 6 activities of daily living or a loss of cognitive capacity, which is dictated by your physician or 2 physicians. So typically it's regardless of Alzheimer's, dementia, anything that's going to prevent you performing 2 of those 6 activities of daily living is eligible for care.
One thing to know about Florida, how many people go to Florida on a regular basis, maybe in the winters? Okay, and I'm not saying this is the situation, but I actually was in Florida thinking, I'm going to start a Next Steps for Seniors in Florida because everyone from Michigan goes to Florida. Well, I found something out immediately which changed everything. In the state of Florida, they do not allow Hoyer lifts, and I can refer back to my physician for this, but a Hoyer lift, if you are overweight, over a certain amount of weight, you have to have a 1-person transfer. They will allow. If it's anything more than a 1-person transfer, they won't allow you to have that in an assisted living legally. Something must have happened in the state of Florida. So any overweight person, I'm guessing I'm going to say 150 pounds, I don't know what it is, but you should move back to Michigan. Don't stay in Florida. I'm just being honest. I was flabbergasted because I talked to a client there who had a loved one who was 300 pounds and had memory issues, and the only place that the state of Florida would allow her to stay was in a skilled nursing. And it was $15,000 to $20,000 a month. So an assisted living and a memory care would not take that patient. So I'm not saying that was the scenario, but every state is different, and it was unbelievable to me. So I tell everyone, move back to Michigan.
I suspect that's it, though. I suspect that the reason for the cancer issue being where they wouldn't accept her was that she had medical needs that they weren't able to. Generally, in an assisted living and memory care and those types of things, they don't have medical staff there 24 hours a day. So if somebody needs, an IV or an injection, or they have got a Foley, or they've got different things, and they need sort of medical, a lot of times the assisted livings are not equipped or legally licensed to do that. Unfortunately, what that means is probably skilled care, which is sort of your traditional nursing home type situation, which is costly. In the state of Michigan, the average cost of skilled care is for private pay is about $13,000 a month. Yeah.
Right. It is 10:03. We said it'd end at 10. So I'm going to try and wrap this up in the next couple of minutes with a few things. So number one, anybody in the room have living parents and living children? Like me, right? So we are affectionately called the sandwich generation. Yes, Tracy. And so all this time we're spending talking about our living parents, especially if your children are 18 years of age or older, all of these financial power of attorney, healthcare power are super, super important for them. So one more plug for you to become the 2,000,001th, if that's the right way to say it, Mannor Law Group follower on TikTok. That's what his thing about. It's 18-year-olds and lawyers like him talking about how if your kid is over 18 and doesn't have those documents. So my 5th child just turned 18 in April, and guess what he signed? Financial power of attorney, healthcare power of attorney, so that now we have that because it is a big deal. You think your kid turns 18, something happens, you have authority, you don't, right? So go on Mannor Law, TikTok, or whatever, but we're the sandwich generation. You've got to look at your parents and look at your kids and make sure all those things are taken care of. And then I want to wrap up, and we'll go from left to right, and I want to have, and I didn't prepare you for this, so hopefully you can come up with it, but if you just wanted to say one thing to the people today, what would it be? One point that you made earlier or didn't make, you want to leave them with one nugget. Brendan, what is it?
If you haven't had the conversation with your family, have that conversation. If they have insurance, make sure that they know what they have, you know what they have, and that's probably the big two things. Have the conversation, and if they have legal documents, if they have insurance in place, have the conversation of finding out where it is, know what it is. You just don't want to be surprised by anything.
Wendy?
Couple things. I would say do the research. There are different level hospitals, for example, level 1 all the way to a level 4. Level 1, for example, is Royal Oak Beaumont. Level 2 is Troy Beaumont. So you can do this research in advance and know where you want to go. Look at some of these places in advance. There is so much information out there. I just want to encourage you to pre-plan. One of the biggest things that I'm doing personally, because it's so near and dear to my heart, is I have a long-standing radio show every Saturday at 11 on FM 92.7, and it's called Next Steps for Seniors, and I educate people and have different guests on every single week. And Bob Mannor's been on the show. So the goal,
Has been on the show.
Joe Mackey
Recently on the show.
was on the show. So I feel like it's extremely important to, and that's a free resource. Every week we talk about different topics. So just wanted to make you aware of that. I think it's important.
And one other thing, to your point, if someone is bringing a long-term care insurance idea to your parent, it's always helpful to just see, are they looking at all of the options? Are they
Right.
selling them one thing, or are they educating them on, here's traditional long-term care, here's a hybrid policy, here's life, because there's no one size fits all when it comes to long-term care insurance.
Brendan, I thought you were going to say a second set of eyes on it because seniors are victims.
Yes.
Be careful.
Unbelievable.
Fraud.
They are
Yeah,
sold.
there's a lot
sold,
of
sold.
abuse around selling products to
Tons,
seniors,
tons.
particularly around annuities and not around long-term care.
We could
but
do a
just
whole nother
it's a
show
whole
on
different thing.
So
But-
Amy, I would happy to look at that for Betty and have Brendan look at it for, just
And it very well might be fine.
My sister and I nervous, and
Yeah.
I've never met him. He was her neighbor across the street and
Yeah.
was a financial advisor.
it might be great.
It could be
but-
totally fine and be the right thing.
I don't
But
know.
we'll take a look at it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's another thing. I'm gonna plug MKD for a moment, or MKD-like organizations, that if you do have a parent that has a financial advisor, get to know that financial
Yeah.
advisor. How comfortable are you with that financial advisor, that you can ask them information to a certain extent that they can disclose it. They won't be able to necessarily disclose everything, but staying in touch with, when was the last time you met with Joe? Were there any recommendations that came up? Can I meet him? Because in most cases, that's the guy, other than unless you gotta get something done in court right away, that
Yeah.
you need to go to, because if it's comprehensive planning, they got all the information.
John, to your point, I've started to have some of my elderly clients, their kids come to the meetings with them. Just had it last month. And he called me and said, hey, I know we haven't met, can I? And I said, absolutely, please come. His mom is 92 and runs around like she's 62, but still, she's 92. He's like, at some point, I got to get involved, even though she's like the Energizer Bunny,
We asked my mom, said, can we be a part of your meeting? Because she always scheduled these, and she tells us after the fact that she met with Norm. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. So I just want to say one more thing. Many financial advisors like this group do not do things like this. You are very blessed to have someone like this team who is willing to bring in people who are experienced and share this information, because we're all going to go through it at some point. So well done
Thanks.
to you guys.
Bob, one last thought?
Before I get to my one last thought, I just want to say what John said was exactly right. No matter what legal documents you have, if you have a relationship, everything's going to go so much easier. If you have a relationship with your parent's doctor, with your parent's financial advisor, it's just going to go so much easier, because we can pull out these legal documents, but are they going to be accepted or not? That is actually my final point, and probably the thing that this boils down to the most. We got to have permissions in place, right? That's what your powers of attorney, your trust, things like that. Permissions where mom or dad has given you authority to act, your loved one has given you authority to act. I say this frequently whenever I talk about, really, if you have somebody you love and trust, they should have permission to be able to help you if and when you need help. That's the biggest issue. I can tell you, if we end up in court, our options are much fewer. And if you think about it from a judge's perspective, the judge is seeing every part of society, and the judge has to assume that you're a bad person trying to take advantage of your parent. That's what they have to assume. That's how they structure it typically when you go for a guardianship. They were going to want to put guardrails and things in place to make sure that you're not taking advantage of. But that severely limits our options to be able to do what's best for mom and dad. So get those permissions in place. If you're over 18, having somebody you love and trust appointed to be able to assist you with financial, medical, legal, all those things, so important. And all of this boils down to that. If I could, that's the one thing, if I could get people to understand, a lot of this we can figure out if we have somebody that you love and trust that would be able to step up if needed.
Couple of things for housekeeping and closing. The notebook that's in front of you, inside of there's a piece of paper with all three panelists' name and email address. If you want to reach out to them, I'm sure they would help. Love to hear from you. I have a few minutes after. I don't know if you guys do. We'll all stick around if anybody wants to come up and ask another question. I know, Tim, you raised your hand. I didn't call on you. I'm sorry. But maybe you come up and ask a question up here. What else? Oh, we are videoing this. You noticed that. And we are going to, edit it and then make the content available on our website. So if you want to share this with somebody else who wasn't here that needs to hear this information at some time in the near future, I'm sure we'll send out an email saying click here, and we'll probably post it on LinkedIn and things like that. So thank you very much for coming today. It was a pleasure to have you. Hopefully this was helpful. And that's it. It's a wrap.